and welcome to another episode of Fintech Focus TV with me, Toby. Today, I am absolutely delighted to be joined by Andy Mahoney from FlexTrade. How are you?
Good. Thank you very much for having me.
Listen, it's great to have you on. And listen, it's been some great stuff that I've been hearing about the business so far. It sounds like you guys have had a good year, despite everything, despite all that we've been going through over the course of it. Tell us a little bit about FlexTrade. Tell us about what you've been up to and the journey and your journey in the company, because I know you've been there for a while and your role's changed and developed a little bit. Tell us about that journey.
Sure. Yeah. So I'll start with myself, and then we'll talk about FlexTrade. So my name's Andy Mahoney, as you say. My current role is Managing Director of the London office of FlexTrade, which is about 100 people. My career started pretty much at FlexTrade. I had a brief period where I worked in a visual effects studio, and then came into finance straight from there. I started as a developer back in 2004. Ended up running the implementation and support team. Then I left for 2 years, went to Goldman to run the Ready Plus product, and then after 2.5 years of that, came back to FlexTrade, which is a good 8 years ago now. Started in a sales role, and then eventually, as of 3 or 4 months ago, I've been made managing director. So it's my responsibility to run the London office. So yeah, FlexTrade is a business. As you say, we're having a great year. It's been an unusual year, is an understatement of the year. Yeah, we basically started the year obviously with lockdown. From our perspective, there were a few challenges there. Our key sales pitch, or our key kind of approach to talking to clients, is very hands-on. Like, we love to travel. It's one of the things that I think we pride ourselves as a business. We're always there when you need us. We have this process, like for example, when a client goes live, where we call it early care, which is essentially a client will have a FlexTrade technical person on site during go live that can sit in a corner if they want, or they can sit on the desk and always be kind of there to answer any hands-on questions or any questions that need technical expertise. Even if they don't get used, we like to just put someone on site. Equally, with the sales process, we're constantly traveling like 4 to 5 times a week to go and see clients, go and see prospects, and visit conferences, etc. And obviously with lockdown, that's all had to change. It was a frightening experience going into lockdown, obviously experiencing work from home for the very first time. So I had always maintained I didn't think I could do my job from home. And now it's just become the norm, as they say. So, I mean, we had to adapt. Initially, we sat down just before lockdown and said, what do we need to prioritize? What can't fail? Like, what do we need to continue? So there's things like infrastructure operations, support, maintenance, new development. We said we could potentially put that on hold if we desperately needed to, but it turns out actually everything was reasonably smooth. The first week or so, there were teething problems with cameras and audio and things like that, but we've actually taken a handful of clients live and actually gone from initial discussions to contract signature all through lockdown. So although it has, I would say, it's probably changed the way the process works. It's changed our kind of approach to how we talk to clients and how we interact with clients. It's not let up. It's been a very interesting year and a very productive year for us. I think the key one for me was a successful go live with a large asset manager we have, where they were expecting the hands-on, the person to kind of come and sit with them, and they were very keen on that approach. But we did it all remotely. We kind of left a WebEx running all day with a video camera on the person to see that they were still there. And then as and when the client needed some help, they basically just picked up the mic and said, can you just, how do I do this? How do I do that? So yeah, it's been a very interesting year. I am looking forward to getting back to the office though, for sure.
That sort of improvisation and adaptability has been a sort of key feature of all of this, isn't it? And I love the fact, as you say, that people have been able to sort of still get things through signature and go live and everything, and then just looking at it and saying, right, how can we still keep that sort of great customer service and interaction? Because as you say, look, when you've got people there physically on site and so much one-to-one hand holding, it's a really important thing that continues to maintain that, because I've seen so many companies that sort of are almost punished by the success of their sales team, if you see what I mean, overselling, and then they're not able to fulfill with the implementation and follow up there afterwards. It's been a big theme of the vendor space and trading technology for donkey's years. And I think the companies that have, like you, who've had that longevity and that sort of strength and brand reputation, have generally been the ones who've been able to make sure that the post sales is as important as the sales behind it to create that great customer experience on the other side. To have to completely revolutionize that, there's a challenge, right? And fair play to you for being able to get that right as well. What are some of the learns you've had from that?
Yeah, I mean, the key thing is just to your point about our longevity. We've been around 25. I think next year is our 25-year anniversary or something. So we've got the longevity, but there's no getting away from it. FlexTrade is a kind of customized solution. It's the clue is in the name. It's a flexible system. So while some vendors might have an off-the-shelf system that kind of what you see is what you get, and you don't really get much more than that, FlexTrade has a base setup, and then it grows with you. It evolves with you. So naturally, with that, there are complexities. There's nuances that clients need to know. So really adapting to be able to rather than sort of having to create huge amounts of documentation that no one will ever read, we just kind of get the people on site and get the person that generally configured the system is going to be the one that's kind of supporting you. But yeah, the key learning for me is really, I mean, the future is definitely a hybrid model in terms of work from home versus working from the office. From a personal perspective, I live a good 35 minutes outside of Euston. The fact that I don't have to travel to work or don't have to potentially in the future even go in 5 days a week is a massive relief to me. I feel I'm not any less productive. I think the team are extremely good at just getting on a call, getting on a video conference. So I think the key thing is we don't have to exist in this 5-day-a-week world where we all come to the office. We've even had requests for people wanting to move to different regions of the UK, and I think that's massively interesting to see that kind of potential happening in the business, because from a productivity perspective, we are a technology shop, and most of the technology is development and implementation. And as long as people are at the end of the phone line, and I don't necessarily think they have to be in London. However, we do want to maintain that high touch service. We want to be able to go and visit clients, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you need to be sort of sitting at an office in London, in the center of London, congested, etc. The whole week. I think there's definite flexibility there. And I guess the other thing is just the move to the cloud, like the ability to, the things that have kind of been highlighted as difficult when we move to this work from home environment is physical stuff that resides in the office is sometimes difficult to access, whereas you have things like in AWS or in cloud services that really you can access at the drop of a hat from anywhere, and it's super easy. And that's one of the things that I'm personally trying to get us more excited about, is just the ambition in the cloud. So we have our own hosting within Equinix LD4 data center and other Equinix data centers across the globe. But we've also started prototyping in Amazon Web Services using AppStream to deliver our application, because ultimately that is the future, like not having any kind of physical presence, and this physical presence being rather ethereal. Like I saw something from Microsoft where they'd sunk a data center to the bottom of the ocean to keep it cool. And it was like, your data might end up residing at the bottom of the Atlantic, and that's okay. Like, you need to accept that that's okay. So yeah, just making sure that all these things can be delivered over the cloud with no single point of failure, not having some physical box sitting somewhere that is somehow dependent. This has just highlighted the need for a full cloud strategy and embracing the cloud. And I feel like a lot of people have been talking about cloud for some time. Obviously, it's not a new topic, but what we've done is using our FlexNow application, which is a Greenfields EMS we started writing a few years ago. We've fully embraced onto AWS. It's completely scalable. It's completely based in the cloud. It's not an application that you've shifted from on-prem to the cloud. It is truly cloud native. Not necessarily that clients massively care about that, but I think it's important from a resilience perspective, a performance perspective, and a business perspective as well.
I think that sort of leads on to a really interesting point about you mentioned their business resilience, and this has been a broadside that actually most companies have been able to navigate relatively easily because of technologies like such as cloud. And if this, I often think if this was 10 years ago, it would have been a completely different ballgame. And God, everyone would have adapted, and there would have been something, but it just wouldn't have been able to work in the same sort of way. And financial services in particular have been incredibly robust around all of this. But there have been companies there that have had the right sort of tech strategy that have given them massive trading advantage, like significant advantage all the way through that. And the disruption was far less than those companies who've potentially been a little bit more standoffish again, particularly around the cloud. So they were having to sort of rapidly scale and fix problems that were already there. And there were companies that sort of seamlessly moved into it and saying we're already in this sort of position because of their tech readiness for such an environment or such a thing. And there will definitely be, but whilst we've gone through this and we want to look positively and optimistically at the horizon with everything that's going to be much sunnier in tomorrow with all of this, without question, there'll be another bump in the road. And we could, in pandemic cycles that we've probably seen with SARS and everything out, and that we've seen coming through Asia, that this isn't likely to be a one-off over the course of the next 5-10 years. So be it 5 years, 7 years, as usual economic cycles go, 10 years or whatever we might be looking at, something else will come up to disrupt this sort of thing. Talk to me about how companies can make sure that they are fixing ahead of problems rather than having to sort of fix the outboard motor in the middle of the storm halfway across the Atlantic.
Yeah, I think that's a very apt analogy where at the start of the pandemic, you don't want to be starting a new project. You don't want to be like you're in an unprecedented time. Everyone's working from home. All your project managers, business analysts, everyone is kind of in a state of flux. So we did see during the start of the pandemic, some of the projects that were ongoing kind of slow down because people were like, we've got bigger things to worry about. But once people got over the hump of kind of, okay, everything's working from home, you kind of realize that if you've got a good front office trading technology strategy in place and you've made a few good decisions over the past few years, there was nothing really to worry about. Yes, there was more kind of work from home. There was more complexity involved in how you actually distribute applications to traders, performance things. But I think those that have made good decisions in the past had nothing to worry about. And I think to your point, yeah, it's you can't hesitate with these kind of decisions because you never know what's going to be around the corner. I mean, a good example is something I've been quite passionate about for many years is the open architecture approach and the interoperability approach of things like FTC3 with the implementation from OpenFin, Glue42, Finsample, etc. You think about a trader's home PC. It's probably unlikely to have the raft of 8 or 10 or 12 monitors that they might have in the office. So things like interoperability and not just having one static application that talks to another one that you have to copy and paste. Like the operational risk involved in having someone work from home is high enough without having to worry about them copying and pasting between these legacy applications that they've had on their desktop and all configured in their various different monitors all the way they like them. So I think hopefully if this pandemic brings anything, it will be a focus on making sure that the layer of application, like the GUI, as they say, or the user experience, is seamless for the traders. So it's whether they work from home, whether they work from the office with the different screen layouts, with the different architecture setups, they should be able to communicate between applications and have everything controlled from a central cockpit rather than having to manually process stuff and manually copy and paste stuff. So we definitely think that that's an important thing for people to start embracing. And it's not something that you can kind of say, well, let's do a little bit with FTC3. It's like it's a full technology trading technology approach. It's saying that I want my applications to talk to each other through a normalized, sanitized bus, so that if I change my TCA provider or my pre-trade provider or any of my other providers, that I don't need to change that central core or change any of the other applications. It's really important as people go through this kind of bumpy period, and as you say, resurgence of other or potentially resurgence of other viruses or a second wave or the third wave, we need to have these things sorted. So it's making sure that the trader can operate as simply, efficiently, and from a risk perspective as minimal risk as possible in terms of rekeying at home as they can at work, given the different technology that they might have in the two workplaces.
Interoperability is a really interesting one because, and I've said it right for the first time, I think, in all of these.
I gave you a prep. I told you how it was meant to be said.
It's one of those things, and I know it's been sort of high on your agenda, the whole open architecture aspect you've just been sort of talking through there. And I think this is something which is, absolutely plays to common sense for me. The sort of playing in deep specialists in areas, because we're talking about really complex things, and the sort of enterprise businesses being all things to all people, and particularly sort of solving it through acquisition and these sort of Frankenstein's monsters that we've seen at various different stages of businesses that cover everything through interoperability, through acquisition, I guess is ultimately something which has been happening. How's that benefit the end user at the moment? Because that seems to be the big winner from it. Whilst there's companies there that are now far more easy or able to get through procurement processes that have probably stemmed that and made it more difficult for companies as specialists to get taken in under the umbrellas of the major institutions for many years because of just hugely overly complicated procurement processes and such like. What's the sea change that has allowed that sort of efficiency to really benefit the end user and allow companies to thrive?
Yeah, I think your point about acquisition and merger is quite well timed, given certain news that's just come out in the last few days. But I mean, we've seen it again and again. A merger and an acquisition, it doesn't really change anything. You might have two products that are somewhat compatible or somewhat sort of related to each other, and on paper, it makes sense for those two firms to collaborate or to integrate in a way that will provide a seamless user experience. In a way that kind of provides that one system. The problem is that's not how acquisitions work. Typically, they're like, okay, you have, as an example, you've bought a PMS. You're an OMS provider. You've bought a PMS, and you say, okay, well this should work, right? I mean, and there's some demo to some executive that says, well, they seem to talk to each other. What's the problem? Like, why do we need to invest a whole bunch of money, sort of integrating them tighter? And the problem is that the tech spend to actually re-architect the platform or to build the platform in a way that the users want is just too high. So people end up with, as you say, these Frankenstein systems or Franken systems in a way that they pretty much talk to each other the way that they talked to each other prior to the acquisition, but it's just now sold as a bundle. So people are getting stuff that they could have got previously, but with one technology provider, which is I guess a benefit, but really it doesn't actually solve the problem that people are looking for. Like, I don't see like anything dramatic happening in the next few years, but I do think in the next 5 years, I would hope for a world where actually a lot of these technology providers have realized that they do one thing particularly well. Like, we know we're the best EMS and OMS provider. There's no question about that. We know what our edge is, we know why we're good, and we know why clients choose us. And it's what we are focusing on is, we know that EMS and OMS isn't the end of the world. We know there's the PMS, we know there's TCA, we know there's other bits, but rather than trying to say, you must take our TCA, you must take our other systems, we invest in them, we try and do our best, we try and find a niche. But actually, if a client wants to go and find another TCA provider or another PMS, for example, they should absolutely be allowed to. And to try and put artificial barriers in front of them, whether in terms of like a strategic partnership saying we'll only integrate with these guys or we'll only do this, it's so backward. The future to me is like each of these very strong technology providers providing the technology that they're good at and giving up the user interface. This might seem like a weird thing for a technology provider to say, but it's okay not to own the user interface. The key is the guts behind it, like the API layer, the normalization. So my view is in 5 years' time, the GUI will largely be irrelevant. It will be a set of UX engineers that are like, you'll have a third party or a user experience design agency that will use tools like Adaptable Blotter, OpenFin, FinSample, Glue42 to basically figure out which bits of which vendors they need to use and essentially present a user interface that's coherent and consistent based on the user's desires. Now, the reason that couldn't happen previously is because with a tightly coupled user interface to the backend, it's very difficult to make one change on the front end that will affect, because it might affect lots of different things. With a normalized, sanitized API, you can make very quick, very flexible changes on your front end to a way that allows new workflows without having to worry exactly which vendor is providing which bit of technology in the background. So yeah, we're very passionate about that. As I said, we feel we're the strongest EMS and OMS provider. We have all the technology, but I feel like the benefit really comes when you look at the user experience as being something that is very close to the user rather than being focused in technology. Not, I have the best GUI because I've got a .NET GUI or a Java GUI or any kind of GUI. It's like saying, I will provide the best user experience because I'm going to talk to the user and use the APIs that are at my disposal to make those decisions. So I think, if anything, I'm really keen for us to focus even heavier on the EMS and OMS space rather than divest any further, just purely because there's still a lot to do in the EMS and OMS space. There's problems that haven't been solved. There's things that we need to work on. So to try and become like, as you alluded to, like this enterprise software provider that tries to be everything to all people. It's not the way of the future. Like the future is being able to talk to other applications on your desktop seamlessly. And the sad thing is, this has been done in every other industry so many years ago. There's existing APIs, there's existing frameworks to do these things. It's not like you load up, I mean, Word and Excel are probably a bad example because they're made by the same provider, but it's not like those things aren't allowed to talk to each other, or you can't copy and paste between Word and Excel. This is simple stuff. So yeah, I'm very keen on the interoperability side of things, and to me, I want to be in a competitive landscape where I'm competing and winning business because I'm the best EMS and best OMS, not because of some alliance or partnership or some business reason that someone's being forced to use it. Like I want clients to have the best EMS they want and they have demand for, rather than being kind of strong-armed into taking something just because it's somehow integrated. Then because as you say, it just ends up with Frankenstein systems rather than having best of breed, and it's not optimal for sure.
Yeah, I love that best of breed. I love the passion actually about you talking about that, and I've been a big fan of and student, I guess, of the OMS EMS space for years, since probably going back to mid 2000s when I first started placing people into that sort of space, and it's sort of grown exponentially. We've seen various different people and various different providers within that space. I'm really interested about something you just said there about there's still loads of problems to solve. What are you seeing as the customer problems, and where are the opportunities that you think you can add some real value to over the next year or two?
I realized as I said that, I was like, he's going to ask me about that, and I can't tell him. No, there's a few things. I don't think there are any. They're not any secret in the industry. I think they're things that everyone's trying to solve. So the first big one is broker algo distribution. It's a massive frustration to everyone. Like every vendor in the world has a process for onboarding algos with brokers, but I still feel, and we've got it down pat, like we can do it super quickly, and I'm sure our competitors can do it super quickly, but there's still some involvement from the vendor, when actually it's not like every time you upgrade your Google Chrome or every time you upgrade your Firefox, you have to contact Mozilla or you have to contact Google and say, like, can you upgrade it just happens automatically. This is not difficult stuff. And there should really be no engagement. And one thing that, I'll give you a bit of a sneak peek, but one thing that we're working on at the moment is
this is the ability to Fintech Focus TV right now.
Fintech
I'm excited.
Exclusive. Yeah, well, we'll be announcing it in the next couple of weeks. It's something that the brokers should be able to push an ATDL, the XML representation of the algo, onto the trader's PC directly, and should be able to do that in a way that means that they can adjust the algo on the fly, rather than having to go through a long period of testing and a long period of sort of making sure that it's conformed, etc. That flexibility should be there for the client. Now, there are downsides. It's like the client and the broker need to have a strong enough relationship that they understand that this is possible. We don't want to be pushing something onto a trader's desktop and for him to go, I didn't want that, didn't expect it. But as long as we solve from a technology perspective, the rest will sort itself out, and the market will evolve with that. What I don't want to do is have a process in place just because that we've never been asked something different. I want us to innovate. I want us to be able to say, do you know what? This is a problem that requires a person. Why does it require a person? And can we do anything to resolve it? Regardless of whether the current market norm is you involve a person and do this, like, let's just create the technology to do it. It's not a big lift for us to do that. The other area that I feel like there's a lot of innovation to come, and something that I'm personally very passionate about, is getting broker information and venue information onto the client's desktop, onto the buy-side desktop. So if you imagine what I was describing about the user experience, we have FlexTrade on a client's desktop. So we see Symphony as like a transport layer where you've got the data coming. You can set up a chat room very, very quickly and easily, and you're encrypted, and you can put structured data onto that chat room and pull data off the other side. So in the example of working with this broker, they didn't want to have to go through. They had done the hard work of creating these alerts. That's the content. But the transport has now been solved and is being solved on a daily basis by just saying, right, broker, you have that data, you want to give it to the buy side, assuming the buy side wants to see it and understands the data and wants to interact with it. Just let's solve the technology side of things. Let's not make it into you need to set up a VPN, you need a 6-month conformance. Like, these things are just slow. Let's just make it, there are technologies available to make it seamless. Another good example is LiquidNet. We did, I can actually talk about that because we announced it a few months ago now, where they had LiquidNet. LiquidNet had a set of alerts, or a set of essentially like actionable IOIs. They were called targeted invitations, where they would send that data over, well, it was over fix at the time, but they wanted the ability to show in the FlexTrade blotter a way that, in a way that would allow the user to take the next step very, very easily. So you would get a targeted invitation, and then the next step, when you'd seen that that targeted invitation was shown, you would single click on it, or you could also automate it so you wouldn't need to click at all. But for the purposes of discussion, you have one click that then takes your order, automatically routes it out to LiquidNet, matches with that liquidity, and you're done. That's fine. So it's, again, reducing that number of deterministic actions by the user. So deterministic meaning anything where the trader isn't adding their own value or adding their own judgment. They should be minimized to literally just a judgmental call. So I'm saying, literally, you're driving a ship saying, I want to go this way or that way. I don't care about exactly how it works. I just, or the steps behind that take place, the button clicks, etc. It should just be judgment calls that a trader is making.
Yeah, I think this is fundamentally, this is a fascinating area for me, and there's so much that is common sense about what you're talking about, and the financial industry has been, behind in some of its user-centric, sort of focus. I think for a number of years compared to other areas, as you say. You mentioned before, this technology is out there and being used in other fields, and it's not tremendously difficult technical challenges that we're dealing with. And the big thing I've seen, particularly over the last 2 years, is how the fastest growing and the best companies are really putting the customer at the heart of the problems that are being solved. So it isn't, as technology has been for many years, super clever, overcomplicated stuff. This is looking at the end user problems and saying, how do we solve them with the best and easiest solutions for the people who are driving that ship at the side of it. And I think that's been a fundamental change that we're seeing, and exactly what you're talking about. Where do you think, out of the industry, where do you think some of the lessons are to be had? Which industries are getting that absolutely right?
I mean, the industry sort of, it's sad to say, but advertising. I know it's one of those things that I sometimes say in meetings, and I'm not sure whether it has the right reaction or the wrong reaction. But if you're not paying for the product, you are the product, and that's a lesson that needs to be learned in financial services for sure. And it's well known in advertising. If you're on Facebook, if you're on Google, you don't pay for it, you are the product. It's this concept, I think, of the billing model in financial services really needs to change. Like, to me, there is technology that needs to be paid for. And to me, if I was in the seat of a trader and the seat of an investment manager, I'd be thinking, I want to make sure that this is a piece of technology that is saving me money and making my trading way more efficient and improving my alpha in the execution piece. I want to pay money for that. It's like that's okay. Like, embracing a technology cost, especially in alternative asset classes like fixed income, is really important, and something that I think the technology is starting to get there, where people are starting to embrace the fact that actually you need to pay for these kind of systems. But where systems have got this really right, or where technology providers have got this really right, is focusing on one thing and doing it really well. There is an explosion in fintech for sure. I think we've been saying this for as long as we've been around. Is just there's a number of firms, smaller technology firms, that are building up very small bits of code or very small bits of product that solve one thing extremely well. But the key thing is, going back to your point about procurement processes don't favor small technology firms. They favor large technology firms, or the old adage of no one ever got fired for choosing Microsoft is quite apparent here. And you've got large firms that are going through very rigorous RFP process, very rigorous procurement process, which I don't disagree with. They obviously have to check their boxes, but they need to have some there needs to be some ability for these smaller firms that are, as I said, are doing one thing extremely well, to compete, or to not have to not potentially go through these processes, but to understand like how they can get on the trader's desktop more easily. There has definitely been a focus in the last few years, and I would say almost over lockdown as well, a focus on proof of concepts, which I love, because if ever there's a time to show you that I know what I'm doing and I can do exactly what you want, that's a time to shine. And typically at the start of a proof of concept, I will always say, what's the most difficult problem you have to solve, and let me solve that, because I don't like, I'm confident I can do everything else, but what is the problem that you can't solve with any other vendor, or what is the vision for your future trading desk? So I kind of I've not really given a massively coherent answer to that, but my key thing would be not stifling innovation, embracing innovation, embracing new fintech vendors, and not accepting just a kind of basic solution from your existing provider because they happen to have one, and actually saying, well, what value is that product adding, and making sure that you understand the competitive landscape, and the things like interop are being solved, or I would almost argue have been solved already. So you shouldn't have to worry about how does that system integrate with the other. There shouldn't be any fear of saying, well, you know, one vendor saying, well, we don't know how it will work with that system, or we can't guarantee it will work with that system. That's nonsense. Like, it's technology. I have slightly ironic saying internally, it's just ones and zeros. Like, this stuff is not complex. It's very well trodden in other industries. Not even high-tech industries. People have got this right better than financial services. A lot of the resistance has been business orientated or business driven or commercially driven, rather than saying these things should talk to each other. There's no reason why not. And that's, again, coming back to my principles, leading this business is trying to make sure that if there is automation to be had, regardless of whether the market needs that right now, let's solve the problem, because I guarantee those things will be appreciated with time. And again, coming back to the number of times we're minimizing the amount of human interaction with any kind of process, and making sure that from a trader perspective, they are always put first, meaning that they're never having to worry about, oh, I have to go through 10 clicks to get to this, or 30 clicks to get to that, or I have to go to another system. It's like, these things should be accessible through APIs, and that should be just judgment calls that are made. You can bet completely that Facebook rationalizes down the number of buttons you need to go through. Actually, I was watching a better example. I was watching a program on Amazon the other day where they've rationalized that buy button down to the optimal way of interacting, of buying that item. There is investment. You need to invest in your user. You need to understand what their desires are, how they're interacting with the information, and what they actually want to achieve. It brings me on to one topic that I really enjoyed, the fintech interview that you did a while back about with John Butler, about the new blotter, and like he's been very vocal on changing the way blotters are presented. I've been passionate about this for years, but I don't understand what the solution is, because if you talk to a user about how they want data presented, the general answer is just like Excel or just like a grid. But we must be able to do better than that. It's like saying, just because it's been a grid your whole life and everyone thinks of data as a grid, it doesn't have to be like that. You look at any of the applications that you have on your phone, they're not a grid style application where you have to click through various different cells. It's way more complex and way more in tune with the user and way more easy to navigate. So I feel like the market is kind of evolving into a way where if vendors understand that it's okay not to own the desktop real estate, and actually it's better for the user to have the right experience, then it will allow the user experience to then sort of go exponentially better, because you'll be focusing on what the user wants rather than saying, oh, well, that doesn't quite work with my backend, or that doesn't quite work with my technology. It's just saying, well, how do you want this to work? Do you want some kind of Minority Report style augmented reality, which, as a side note, we launched in Trade Tech 2017, an augmented reality headset where you could play with orders and like move them around. Obviously, no one's going to use it, but the key thing is thinking of new ways and not just waiting for the client to ask for it. You need to understand the client's requirements, but also join the dots between various pieces and see what you actually want to do for the future. Because there's no point in just doing what you're told. You have to actually come up with innovations and try and push the future agenda yourself as well.
This is the classic sort of Henry Ford quote, isn't it? About if I asked the people what they want, they'd have said faster horses. And I think that's exactly what you're talking about. And I love it. I'm unashamedly fascinated by the client focus of Amazon, of Google, of Netflix, companies that I've been reading books on all year, just to have a look at that sort of thing. Google, you mentioned about how many, the optimum number of words they have on their page, and how they've narrowed it down over time to, when you go to their homepage, just how few words they physically have on there. And I think the whole thing there is absolutely, as you rightly say, just designed there to make it that journey as easy as possible. And I think there's steps being made all the time in financial services to look at that and think about that and say, look, we're here to optimize our clients' opportunities 100%. To make better decisions, make more money. Do things
it's not for them. It's not for us to try and push our way of thinking or our technology or what happens to be our technology stack, be it Java, .NET, whatever. It's not up to us to say, this is how you must trade. It's like, how do you trade? Yeah. Let us design the system around you. And that's I feel the key benefit of something like FlexTrade is you should never have a button click that isn't 100% necessary. And that's what we're trying to focus on, is like all the calls should be judgment calls and the data should be presented in a way that's natural to the user. But as I said, it is quite tricky getting to the heart of what is natural to a user that has literally been using the same structured grid approach for their entire lives. It's difficult to break them out of that, but I think it will come with time. It's just as consumer technology modernizes even faster, it will. So like people are starting to wake up to the fact, like, why is my phone amazing and my trading technology looks like it's from the 1980s? Like that's not okay. And I think with a new breed of like more savvy technologists and things, that will definitely that will only get more apparent.
Yeah, there's a definite shift in the guard. Listen, Andy, there is so much that I want to dive into about this, and this is one of those episodes where I think this is definitely a round 2 that we're going to need to follow up in, because I want to talk to you. I know you've been getting a lot of questions around and opportunities around automation on desk and getting that sort of stuff right. And we're sort of running out of time to be able to talk through all of that. I want to talk about your journey because I'm fascinated as well about that evolution of tech through to boardroom, which doesn't happen all the time. And I think there's a load that people can learn from people there and how they can see that sort of journey happen. And I'd love to talk through that in more detail as well. So this is definitely something with which I'm finishing with a to be continued on it. But I've massively enjoyed this, and I think there's some great insight that you've shared, and I really appreciate it from it. I know there's going to be people as well who've got questions that they're going to want to raise and follow up with you, as I have on all of this too. What's the best way of them getting in touch with you, and who should be reaching out to you right now?
Just drop me an email on andrew.mahoney@flextrade.com or ping me on LinkedIn. More than happy to discuss. Hope I didn't rattle on too much, but I am super passionate about this stuff. I'm a technologist that happened to end up in this industry, and I just strongly feel like there's improvements to be made. And I think passion is the only thing that can change that, because I appreciate that not everything is super easy. There's other reasons, business, commercial, etc. But we should be at heart trying to improve the technology for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And look, there's absolutely no rattling on for me on that. I thought it was. I love talking. I've always loved talking to people who are passionate about what they're talking about, and that just absolutely oozed out from you just then about something which you clearly love doing, and there's no surprise that we've seen that sort of meteoric rise in your career and the company alongside that as well. So, congratulations. Listen, it's been wonderful talking to you. I really appreciate all the time.
No problem.
Fantastic. Thank you all for watching, and we'll see you soon on another episode of Fintech Focus TV. Thanks a lot, everyone. Cheers.
Bye.